Well, firstly, Dave, I'd like to ask you, what do you remember about his death in the movies? Let's look at that first.
Well, in the
Can
movie.
you remind our listeners how he goes out, and also let me know what are your thoughts on that scene.
Right. Well, listeners, for those who haven't seen the extended edition of the Return of the King, isn't it?
Who are you talking to? There are no people.
There are people
that have never seen it.
There's plenty. You should see them on Twitter. Loads of people like, what scene is this from? I'm like, oh my god, my mind is blown. But anyways, the Saruman, he gets his death scene is cast aside and is put into the extended editions where he's basically atop of his tower, exchanging insults with Gandalf, the White, Theoden, Legolas, Gimli, and that's it. Maybe, Éomer as well. And then basically he shoots a lovely fireball down on Gandalf, and Gandalf like completely resists it. And then Legolas eventually shoots... Oh no, Grima comes up to stab Saruman, and Legolas shoots Grima, kills the poor lad, and Saruman falls all the way on top of a big spiky, pointy wheel thing and dies.
Gets nicely impaled. Yeah.
I saw a scene the last day of the actor that plays Grima, and he's like acting out the whole stabbing thing, and then he just like turns to the camera, he's like, you should see me with a 45 Magnum or something like that. 45 millimeter Magnum.
Deadly. I love how like 20 years later, all these actors are just like, that was the greatest moment of my career.
Yeah.
They're just still good on about it. But so as you rightly said there, that his scene was cut from the theatrical editions, which was very controversial, I would say, to have such a huge character and a huge villain to not have his plot correctly wrapped up. So I was looking up stuff about this to see if I could find anything, and I just took something here from screenrant.com. So if you'll bear with me, I'm just going to read this just 2 paragraphs here, where it says, Peter Jackson opted to remove this scene from the theatrical cut of The Return of the King very late in production, replacing it with a short line of dialogue in which the threat of Saruman is revealed to have subsided. Jackson's reasons for cutting Saruman's demise were twofold. Firstly, to pare down a film that was already testing the limits of how long a person can comfortably sit on a theatre seat, and secondly, because of the narrative flow. Jackson claimed in a 2003 interview that the scene was originally intended for the end of the Two Towers movie, but removed in order to wrap up the second film faster. While the director originally thought to place the material at the start of The Return of the King, this created an opening that was more about mopping up past plot threads rather than starting new ones, and so the sequence was cut, with Jackson figuring most viewers would simply assume Saruman was defeated by the Ents. In reality, this editing decision was received far worse than could have been anticipated. Christopher Lee reacted particularly badly to being cut from the final film, reportedly not attending the premiere as a result. This drove a wedge between the actor and director that was eventually healed in advance of Lee's return in The Hobbit. Audiences were left equally unimpressed, wondering what fate befell Saruman after his defeat in the Two Towers, and claiming that a villain of such stature deserved a more fitting end than a mere throwaway line. A petition was even set up requesting the wizard's axed death scene be restored. Under pressure from viewers and legendary actor who sings heavy metal in his spare time, Jackson conceded a mistake had been made and restored the scene in the extended version of The Return of the King, finally making Saruman's death a genuine part of the Lord of the Rings movie trilogy's canon. So that was just a little excerpt from screenrant.com. So a couple of cool things in there, and they had a little mention of Christopher Lee's heavy metal playing as well, which is kind of cool.
That's cool. I'd heard that before, all right, that it drove a wedge between the two. But what I didn't know there, so are you saying that this article is suggesting that this was actually going to be a deleted scene and not even making it into the extended edition? Because
that's what this article is suggesting. I don't know how. I mean, people, you can do your own research, but that seems like
this just calls for, Matt from Nerd of the Rings. He's talked about he wants to have the Mithril edition sometime. We've had the Blu-ray, the 4K, but we need the Mithril edition, which includes all the deleted scenes in the archives, because we know that there are so many other scenes that were shot, like Arwen at Helm's Deep. There's loads of extra scenes of the hobbits messing around in Rivendell.
Eowyn at Helm's Deep as well.
Eowyn fighting at Helm's Deep, again. So there's so many that are shot, but like probably aren't edited perfectly. But just that scene alone at the start of the Return of the King of Saruman dying, like that, that's edited to perfection at this point. And I know they probably mulled over it with lots of time, and they could have done reshoots and all that.
I don't know how much of this article that I would believe. I'd say that maybe it was a strong possibility that scene would have ended up in the extended cut, because it says that it was quite late when Jackson decided to cut it from the actual original theatrical release. So
I know, there must be so many other scenes that are just so late being cut.
But it's interesting. Obviously, what happened was the theatrical scenes or the theatrical movies came out, and then people maybe saw some still images of the behind the scenes thing of Christopher Lee, or they heard him publicly claiming that he was cut out, and so then the petition was started. And maybe all the while Jackson had in his mind, he was like, "Yeah, don't worry, it's going to be in the extended one." So I don't know really what how it lined up, but it is interesting that that a petition was actually created to have him to have his ending reinstated and to have his death scene put in.
I want to see that deleted scene of Frodo where he visions himself becoming like Smeagol. You've seen those photographs, have you? Of like Frodo,
I have,
where he's all like, he looks like Smeagol through his transformation, but that looks really cool, and they definitely put a lot of time and effort into shooting that, and it never made it to any edition of Lord of the Rings. So
that's the thing about movies like this of this scale, the amount of stuff that they must spend, like
that are thrown to the
amount of money and time that they spend, like just putting it, like the effort as well of shooting some certain scenes. And that scene of Frodo's transformation, it probably would have been again like a 5-second clip of just like him just at different stages, but it didn't even make it into that, like you said, in any of the versions.
Yeah, and sure, remember when we interviewed Dallas Barnett on this podcast before, and he talked about like he gets a 3-second shot of just his face close up in the pub, and he basically said that him and Peter Jackson directed him to do scenes of him and the squid, I think, or the squint, like walking down the street with their swords out looking for. Oh yeah, they were like chasing. They had like a chase scene, and he had to like bash into something as well, and like all that.
He had to hop over this cart and
do a little bit of a stunt. Well, anyways, to our listeners, send us a message and let us know what deleted scene you'd like to see appear in the Mithril edition, because I really want that.
Let's get it out there.
And sign the petition as well.
Give us the Mithril cut.
Yeah, the Mithril cut.